Pioneers, welcome to another video. It's a surprise one this week. You might be like, why extra video? That is because two of the videos for this month are related to doing analyses of IPs that were not yet out before November. But why did I explain that in the most convoluted way possible? You've seen my Bat Boy analysis by now, and then my other analysis is going to be of Wicked, which is not in theaters yet. And my Patreon subscribers, the people who are on the top tier of my Patreon, I speak English, I promise, they get early access to all of my stuff, and it felt rude to not give them any of that for November because it wasn't going to happen. Everything was super last minute. So I decided to add some extra videos in, and also we hit 200 reviews for my autism review series, which is thrilling, and so I figured it's time to do another tier list. Why not? Let's do this. These videos are fun because they're unscripted, and I may seem like a very organized scholar in the way that I speak in my videos typically, but this is what happens when my brain fried and I'm tired. So you get to enjoy that. It's going to be great. Also, if you're new here, hi, I'm Sydney. My pronouns are they, them. I am a disability media historian and theater scholar, and I make reviews all the time. I have a 2 a week or 1 a week, depending on what the week is, on autism stuff and disability stuff. They're on my channel, they're on my TikTok, they're on my Instagram. You can follow me in any and all platforms. And when we get to a certain chunk of them, I like to tier rank them because I think that that's fun. So what are our tiers, you might be asking? What a great question. Also, this time, I'm not going to try to make it a public tier that you can make a tier with because nobody really does that, and it's really difficult. And also, if you use autism in the title on TierMaker, it thinks it's hate speech, so it will often not let my thing become public and I have to email them. This has now happened twice, so we're just not going to worry about it anymore. If you disagree with me, let me know. Yeah, so the tiers, here's what we have. I need to start my screen recording. So these are our tiers for today, the ones that we always use. The top one is Go Now. This is like top tier, amazing, wonderful. You should go check it out immediately. It's great, and I think about it often. Below that, we have No Notes, which is something that like is great. It's awesome. It's wonderful. I'm not thinking about it on the day-to-day. Sometimes I am, but whatever. Or it actually does have like one note. It's not perfection. It's just a singular note, but it goes into the No Notes category. Below that, we have No Notes Kids Edition. I find that kids rep is usually pretty good because it's usually really research-based in the way that other stuff isn't, so it gets its own category. Below that, we have Buttered Noodles. This is something that's like a comfort food. Doesn't have a lot of protein, doesn't totally get you through the day, but it's a good time, and sometimes you just kind of need that. This is often stuff that I can't in good conscience recommend to anybody, but I enjoy. It's often stuff that is a good piece of media, but the rep is definitely a little harmful. All those kinds of things. Or the rep is really good and the piece itself is garbage, but that very rarely happens. So that's that one. Below that, we have, well, and that is, wow, this sure does exist. It sure is a thing that exists, and that's just what that is. Often that category will include things that have historical importance but are very offensive looking back. And then below that, we have Borderline Hate Crime. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. So those are our tiers. They exist. It's great. I also, on my website, and I will link this below along with the playlist of all the other tier things that I've done, and then the series of each like individual review, is that on my website I have a page that is specifically about media that I would recommend by category. So like if you want a comedy that includes disability, you can go in there and you can find it. And actually, if you check those in advance, usually you can tell what I'm reviewing for the following month because I do that. I make that recommendations list while I'm making the reviews, which you don't see until about a month after I make them. But anyway, that's beside the point. So that's what we got today. And we are going to get started. So our first one, I'm hoping this is going to be not as long as they always are, but we know me and me unscripted, so it might be forever. Sorry in advance. The first one that we have is Mitchell's versus the Machines. That is going straight into Go Now. Oh, I hate this program. I forgot how much I hate this program. It's going straight into Go Now. This movie made me cry. This movie brought me a lot of joy. It's a great time. I forgot about it until like right now, and I literally might go watch it this afternoon. Cause, yeah. I've been on a movie watching kick, like for fun, not just for research. It's been wild, and everybody who knows me is shocked by it. But this one I might get back to. The next one after this, we have the Lessons in Chemistry book. I believe I put the show and Go Now in my last one, but the book is also incredible. I think they both serve slightly different purposes, but they're both just incredible. I really, really love this book and the show. Really powerful stuff, really great for like unpacking the need to constantly plan for everything and have control over everything. It just really good. I recommend it to all the peoples. Please check it out. Next we have Criminal Minds Through the Looking Glass. This was a Criminal Minds episode that handled autism. I've reviewed a couple. They've done a couple episodes that have done that, and some of them have been pretty all right. This one was not. This one is going straight into the well category. Why did some of these upload out of order? What is happening? This episode specifically, its point was to be like, yeah, this family is chaotic and disorganized, and so we're showing that because like one person's an addict and this kid has autism and all of these kinds of different things that I was like, wow, you really just decided to have this kid be disabled so that it would make this family seem like less put together. And I felt like it was, just unnecessary and not really thought through at all. Didn't love. And again, they've done better in other episodes in previous seasons, so I don't know what happened here. But anyway, next we have Simple Simon. This is a Swedish film, I want to say. I think it was Swedish. It was a little behind on like stereotype of like a little bit from where American cinema was at this time, but I'm not going to critique it in that specific sense because it's not an American film. I really liked it. I think it is very Christopher Boone and it has like room to grow from there, but it also has this like fun Wes Anderson like aesthetic that I think really works for an autism story that I haven't seen utilized in media before, and I was a huge fan of that happening. So we are putting it into Buttered Noodles. Yeah, that's a really good place for it. Good job, former Sydney, for organizing that. That's perfect. Next we have Ghostbusters. Regarding autism representation, it was just kind of like all these characters are really autistic coded, and specifically one of the writers is later learned he was autistic. So it's really interesting to see an autistic person inhabit an autistic role without realizing, like, that's a whole situation. So I think historically it's really important and really cool. I also think I would have liked it more if I had a nostalgia associated with it. I didn't. So I just watched it to watch it like as an adult. So I personally found it really sexist and outdated and didn't think it was super fun, exciting, spooky, all of those kinds of things. So I think putting it in borderline hate crime is rude because A, it's not a borderline hate crime for the autism piece of it, it's for the sexism piece of it. But I still think that that's rude because of historical importance. So we're putting it into Well and we're calling it a day. Here we go. Great. Okay. Next we have Mary and Max. This film snapped me in half like a glow stick, but it has a lot of content warnings with it, so I'm not going to put it into go now. I'm going to put it into no notes. But it's a very dark film, but it is a very good film, and addressed some interesting things about like this character growing up as like, I think it was pen pal if I remember correctly, with this autistic person, and then being like, I'm gonna do all the research to like cure you because clearly this is like what's causing all of the issues in your life. And he's like, no, like I don't want that. And she gets upset, and then she realizes like, no, he's right, like I should be listening to what he wants to say. And I thought that was just really well handled and really beautiful. So good movie. Do recommend checking it out if you are into just, again, really dark things. It's a very dark, but it's also like claymation, and we don't use enough claymation. Claymation is so fun. Next we have Over the Garden Wall. I have complicated feelings about this because I don't necessarily love the idea of using somebody's innocence and like lack of understanding of social dynamics as a way to create suspense for an audience. Like to some extent, I think that's a little bit weird, and like horror has a really complicated history with disability, which we've finally talked about in this channel. I finally got around to it. I will link it in the card above. But I think that overall it was handled like kind of gently here. I think this whole show is like a wholesome vibe to it that I really like. So we're going to put it into Buttered Noodles, I think. It's not like a favorite of mine, but I do have, I guess, some semblance, like not nostalgia because I first watched it in college, but it still has this nostalgic feel to it that's really fun. Next is Princess Diaries. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies. I will happily rewatch it literally anytime. There's a third one that's being made, right? That's a thing that's happening. That isn't just a rumor, right? That is a thing. I hope it's a thing that's happening because I want to see it. So this is going into go now. I think it's a really great example of autistic coding in a character, like specifically how it like exacerbates this teenager awkwardness. I think it's really beautifully done. And again, I just love these movies. They're so fun, and I quote them all the time, and then very rarely do people get the reference that I'm making, and it's just very upsetting. After this we have Bob's Burgers. I personally felt like it was a bit of a narrative shortcut for each individual to make them like comedic, out of the norm, right? Like that's kind of the point of comedy. So we see a lot of autistic coding in various comedies. Doesn't necessarily mean the characters are autistic. Most of the time, I don't think that they are. It's just an archetype. But that being said, I think the familial dynamics they had going on were deeply neurodivergent. Not a show for me, not my favorite, not a big fan, so it's not going into Go Now, but I will put it into no notes. After this, we have Degrassi Next Generation. They tried, and that's really cool. I loved that this character was not white. We don't get that very often in our autism representation. I think it was progressive for the time. They did pronounce it Asperger's the entire show, and that definitely docked some points. So, you know, we're gonna put it into buttered noodles, because, like, I didn't hate it. I just, like, we've done better since this time, and so we don't need to handle that anymore. Where is it? Carl the Collector is next. I'm gonna put it into No Notes Kids Edition. I personally felt like they could have done more with it than they chose to do. I don't know if that makes any sense. My review, I was a little bit more thorough with it. I just felt like it was kind of surface level, which is like fine, but also if we're like working really hard to make autism representation for kids, I've seen other shows be more thorough in the representation that they gave that for kids that was kid appropriate and kid understandable, and I just wish they'd done a little bit more for these characters personally. But that is just me, and I also only watched a couple episodes. Like, they may have changed some of the writing since then, and I know some people who are working on it and they're great, so yeah. Next we have Lars and the Real Girl. It's going into Well because the only way to categorize this movie is that sure is a film that exists, not because of the autism of it all, but just because of what it is. It's like Ryan Gosling. Which Ryan is it? Hold up. The premise of it, if you're not familiar, is it's Ryan Gosling who befriends a sex doll and considers it a human person that he takes around everywhere. And the community is very, like, accepting of it, and it's, like, kind of really sweet. It's just also immensely strange. So it cannot go any higher than Unwell just because of how exceedingly odd it is as a movie. But it is one that I watched with my eyeballs, and it did happen. So after this, we have A World Record Christmas. This, for Hallmark, was super impressive. I had low standards or low expectations going in. I love a good Hallmark movie. I love a good cheesy romance. Still had very low expectations. I thought this was handled, like, pretty well within the confines of it being Hallmark. So we are going to put it into no notes. This is a Christmas movie about a kid who really likes Jenga, if I remember correctly, and he, like, wants to get a world record of Jenga. It's wholesome. It's cute. I thought that he wasn't super tokenized, and it was kind of nice. So good for them. Next, clearly this is the Christmas bunch of movies. The next one we have is The Grinch. I'm going to put it into no notes because I think academically the view of The Grinch as being an autistic creature? And autism. The view of The Grinch being autism is a really interesting analytical lens that I think is really fun. And I want more people to talk about it that way because I think it's exciting. I hate this IP so deeply, and I do not understand what its purpose is. Like, what is the lesson? What is the moral of the story? I don't know. But it sure is one that exists. So we're gonna put it into no notes. Even if I hate an IP, I always encourage interesting disability readings of it, so it will get ranked higher, and that is my inner teacher coming back out. After this, we have A Christmas Story. I feel the same about this one, for different reasons. I also don't understand what the point of the film is. I also don't have any nostalgia with it. I didn't really like it, but I think the idea of, like, the little brother is so aggressively autistic coded to a degree where it's like, well, yeah, he would be diagnosed today. It was just back then they were like, oh yeah, he likes to hide in cabinets and he's picky about the foods that he eats. And I just think it's really cool to see something like that historically portrayed in media, because we don't get that very often. We do in literature more, but we don't see it on film very often, and especially with a child. And I think that just, like, adds an interesting angle to the entire thing about how tired the mother is and how she's, like, working overtime to try to take care of her son who will not eat, who will not show his face, who will not talk to people. And I just think that that's really cool. Again, I don't like the movie. So if you like either of these things and or you understand what the point is or you feel like you do, please let me know, because I just felt like I was missing something. It was kind of upsetting. I was like, what? I've waited so long to watch this movie and I'm just confused. The next one is Our Christmas Story. This one was also Hallmark, I think. They institutionalize him on Christmas and it's seen as a good thing. So it's going straight into borderline hate crime. He also was non-speaking but didn't have any AAC at all. So he just was like a prop for the whole film. It was odd. It was an odd experience. It was strange, and it was one of those ones I was glad I watched at 1.5 speed, which sometimes I do when I know a movie isn't going to be great because the speed doesn't necessarily change the narrative. Next is The Wild Robot. I loved this movie. It was so good. I do think to some extent, right, the autism in this is again allegorical because it's a robot and she's a different like category of species, not the robots are species, but you know what I mean, from the rest of the characters. And so to isolate her, they gave her a different speech pattern, they gave her a different way of looking at life. And like when we are embodying robots, we often autistic code them because they are analytical and all that kind of stuff. We see that happening very often in media. So to some extent, I'm like, okay, can we do something more interesting than that? But the movie was so good that I don't care. Like that is just how the cookie crumbles with that one. So Wild Robot is going up in Go Now because it like made me cry. I didn't expect that, but it really did. I think I watched it like the day after I went to see the Kit Connor Romeo and Juliet, and I was like, oh, he was recently in a movie, I should go watch it. And so I did, and then I was like, I can review this. It was great. The next book, also similar category of I went into it for fun and then turns out it was representation. I love when this happens. It's my favorite thing. I'm like, oh, I got to choose a thing for leisure purposes and then it also happens to turn into work, but like not. That makes it sound sad and like I'm a workaholic. Anyway, moving on. The Rose Code is what is next. This is a book. It's going straight into Go Now. Anything by Kate Quinn you should read. That's just a general thing. I'm not one to be like, this is a specific author you should check out, but she is one that you definitely should. The Rose Code specifically is about a couple women who are code breakers in Bletchley Park during World War II. And one of them is super autistic coded to a point where I was like, was this purposeful? And then I read the author's note at the end and it was purposeful. It was so good. The book is so good, and Kate Quinn is really good at writing suspense in a really lovely way. I recently read something else, The Briar Club. Recently read that one. That one was about a group of women during McCarthyism. So she like covers like really interesting periods of history and with women and cool women specifically. She's really great. Definitely into Go Now. It was such well done representation, and specifically how it like got in her way earlier in life and then it became an asset and then she became just like a terrible person, and you get to watch how like all of those things work. So it kind of covered all of the different grounds of her gaining confidence, and then not like when her social anxiety started to like go away, she suddenly became like controlling over things. And it was just really, yes, it was really well handled. There's also conversations, sorry, I'm just really going off about this book. There were conversations in it about the weaponization of institutionalization and craziness, and using that against people, particularly women, who are threats. And just, it was so well handled. It was so good. It was incredible. The next one is The Onion's Autistic Reporter. He's going into Go Now. I also quote this one regularly. I'm so glad that I found it. I don't know how I didn't know about it until very recently, but The Onion used to have this bit of a news reporter who is autistic, and he's very methodical with his reports. And it's really comical. There's one bit where he's like interviewing somebody about their stay in prison, and he learns that in prison they have really like concrete schedules and they eat the same thing every day and they wear the same thing every day. And he's like, how do I go to prison? I want to go to prison. Prison sounds great. And I just think, it was just great. It was like, I was impressed that a thing specifically meant to be comedic involving autism from over 10 years ago like still really holds up today and was never really poking fun at us, which I was just really impressed by. I really liked that. I thought it was really funny, and it sparked joy for me. It sparks a lot of joy for me. The next one we have is A Man Called Otto. This one's going to go into no notes, and the reason it's not going to go now again is because of content. It is a very, very heavy movie. I know that there is a book. I will not be reading it. But yeah, A Man Called Otto. It was really interesting in handling how different people with different neurotypes handle grief. Like this really, really autistic man and how he's trying to process grief because he cannot handle change. And I thought that was really beautiful and really well handled. It also had great otherwise disability and otherwise trans rep in it as well, which was really awesome. But again, content warning out the wazoo. He tries to off himself like I think 4 times in the movie. So do with that what you will, but it is really good. Also, Tom Hanks can do no wrong, really. So, you know, there is that. After this, we have Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. I'm gonna put this into no notes. This is also a thing that's like not for me, and it's, where is it? There it is. This was also a thing that I felt like was not for me. I've had a lot of those lately, and that's fine. Like, not everything's for me. I'm kind of picky about what stuff I like, but I think you could look at it as being something that is like Dadaist and like has no meaning and just like is crazy and surrealist for the point of just being crazy and surrealist, not having any meaning. But the autistic reading of it, which I was pointed to a video essay about it that I talked about by name in the video the video review that I made of it that I'm forgetting the name of right now. But there's a video essay that is about like an autistic reading of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared that I think is really cool and really great, and again makes my little academic heart sing. I also think to some extent, right, even if we were just like, oh yeah, it's Dadaist and surrealist and it doesn't mean anything, it's important to remember that Dadaism as a artistic, what am I looking for as a word, as an artistic style is inspired heavily by Asylum Theater. The dude whose name I never remember, who created Dadaism, used to go to the local lunatics asylum and would see their theater performances, and often was inspired by what they did to create Dadaism and surrealism, and like those categories of artistic movements do to some extent come from mentally disabled people. So I think it is interesting that we are retroactively looking back at something that exists and being like, oh, here's an interesting autism reading of it, because that, to some extent, that kind of art finds itself rooted in mental disability. And that brings joy for me. So yeah, going into no notes, we already put it there. Huzzah. Next is Yogi Bear. This is going into no notes kids edition because it's a kids movie. This movie really holds up. It really holds up a lot. Yogi Bear as a movie, if you're looking for kids movies for your kids, I don't know how many people with kids watch my content, but if you're looking for kids movies for your kids, it's like 80 minutes, 90 minutes. It's short. And it's Yogi Bear, which is great. We love Yogi Bear. It teaches you a lot about conservation, and the weird people are super, super weird, but it's never funny that they're weird. It's never like secondhand embarrassment cringe, really. It's just like, oh, they're strange, and then the strange people found each other, and they're all happy, and it's really cool being a scholar and being a conservationist and taking care of nature. Like, it's just like, it's so wholesome. It's such a good time. It's a really good movie. So, yeah. Heck yeah, everybody go watch Yogi Bear. What have I become? I watched it because I had like just come back from Yellowstone and I was wondering how much of Yellowstone like it actually used for Jellystone in Yogi Bear. The answer is none of it. Not at all. But I did get to rewatch it as a grown-up and had a really great time. So highly recommend that one. It's very funny still to this day. After this we have Grey's Anatomy. Specifically, Dr. Dixon. And this was interesting for me specifically because I guessed what year the thing was written in by the first 5 minutes of the episode. That was the quality of the representation. I went, oh, this is from 2008, isn't it? Yeah, it was. This one, we're gonna just put into borderline hate crime because it was pretty atrocious. Specifically how they were just walking on eggshells around this character. None of it made sense. None of it made sense. It was just very early 2000s, and it sure did happen. Our next one is The School for Good and Evil, which I gave a really positive review of when I first reviewed it. I have since rewatched the movie, and I have to bump it down a couple tiers, specifically because of the queer baiting, but also because of, like, there was just weirdness around like ADA compliance in that building. There was like a disabled person that appeared once and then another one appeared like twice, and that was just kind of it, and it wasn't logistically like, how would this work? They just appeared sometimes, and I was like, you can't just have a disabled person appear and not make the world accessible to them. That doesn't really make any sense. So that was odd to me. I also felt like it made use of disability aesthetic as part of the ugliness in a way that does reflect the literature that it was acknowledging, but that's one of the things that they don't really critique. Like, there's some things about the issues with historical fairy tales, they do critique in this movie, and that was one of the ones that they just kind of left at face value, and I didn't love that. So we're gonna put it into buttered noodles, just because, like, it's a good time, it's interesting. I just think it wasn't super successful in all of the things that it meant to do. It's also just entirely too long. Again, I enjoyed it and I will be watching it again, but I'm not going to, like, recommend it to people because of all of those things. Below that, we have The Unbreakable Boy. Straight into borderline hate crime. Absolutely. This one I watched on 1.5 speed and I still struggled. I got a vibe from this movie that they thought because they had disabled people involved, it was fine. Specifically a disabled child. And because it's based on a true story, so it must be okay because it's factual, without realizing that facts tend to come through lenses, right? And the lens of this specific story came through was incredibly ableist and incredibly problematic, and also Zachary Levi is in it. So anyway, bad time. Don't recommend, do not watch, do not pass go. They did make some editing choices that I thought were lovely. They made some score choices that I thought were lovely, and that I like hadn't really seen in other things. There were some whimsical qualities to it that I was like, this is fun. I hope that we use this in other films that aren't crimes against humanity. But you know, it's fine. Next we have Dead Boy Detectives. I reviewed this to tell you it's not autism rep, so it's not going on the tier list. I have a request form for representation, so if you want me to review something, feel free to pop it in the request form. The request form does have over 1,000 things on it, so you may not see your thing for 6 to 10 years, but I do have a request form, and sometimes if something pops up a bunch of times, and I know some of you know that because sometimes I will get the same show put into the spreadsheet 6 times in a row. I can tell if you're the same person and it's happening in a row. That doesn't count. But if something comes up a bunch of times in different places, I will more likely move it onto my short list to review. And so I decided to do this because I had like 15 requests for it. I didn't see any autism going on. I saw autistic coding as a narrative tool, I guess. But even then I was like, yeah, there's so many other explanations in the world building of this that explain this character trait more than autism ever does. So it's not going on here, but if you like that show, if ghosts and history things are your thing, cool. Not my thing. I didn't particularly like it, but I'm happy for you. The next one we have is The A Word. I'm putting this into buttered noodles. I felt like the show was really good. I felt like the Down syndrome representation in the show was really good. I felt like the autism representation, which is, you know, what the title is about, was really lacking and not thought through, which is kind of funny given the fact that it's called The A Word. But alas, I really enjoyed the show. I was having a good time. I just felt like the autism was not cohesive or really thought through at all whatsoever. But you know, it happens. It's fine. Next we have Shadow and Bone. Straight into Go Now. I'm still mad we didn't get a season 3. I will forever be mad about that, if I'm honest. I think David's character was just impeccably done. And specifically they acknowledged some politicism in how his character was created, which I thought was just so well done. The show itself is just incredible, and the casting is perfect. Like every single person, I'm like, yes, that is precisely who you should have cast for that. So much usability in that world in general. Highly recommend. I've only read Six of Crows. I haven't read the rest of the books because I love them. They stress me out. I was very on edge reading Six of Crows, and so I have not read through anything else by that author. But incredible work on her part, and incredible work on the show's part. Highly recommend it. Go check it out. Just don't watch the last like 3 minutes of the final episode in season 2 because it does sort of wrap everything up, kind of, and then they add a cliffhanger for season 3 that never happened. So if you just ignore the cliffhanger, you can pretend it doesn't happen. After this, we have, what's next? We're on 179. We're doing pretty good. Next we have Kia and Cosmos. This is going into Unwell because this sure is a movie that exists. It is a Bengali adaptation of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and it inverses the genders of all the characters. Fascinating in concept, right? But then in execution, it takes out all of the things that make Curious Incident fun and interesting and exciting and narratively important. So it ends up not becoming a very great film. It kind of took the whole Odyssey aspect out. The Curious Incident Odyssey, that is the entirety of Act 2, or the entirety of the second half of the book, they put into a 10-minute montage. And I was like, okay, so this person does not the filmmakers did not understand the purpose of Curious Incident, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I'm not going to say it's a hate crime because I know that it was historically a big deal for Bengali cinema to have this character, and to have this representation, and I think that's awesome and great. But I don't think that the film succeeded in what I think it wanted to do, but maybe I'm wrong on that, and that's also possible. I do not have an expertise in that particular genre of film, so I could be wrong. You can tell me I'm wrong, and I will happily accept it. After that, we have The Pit. This is going in to go now. I need to go back and watch this. I said in my review that I was going to go back and watch it, and I still haven't done that, and that's on me. This show's incredible. Period, end of story. That's all that I have to say. No, it's really good. It's a really great show. It's medical procedurals are complicated, and I have a complicated relationship with them, but this one in particular being structured like one shift, and each hour being each hour, and like actually happening kind of live, and then the way that their sets function, the way that the filming functions is fascinating in and of itself. It's just a really cool show. Highly recommend it. Please go check it out. Next is, where are we? Snow White, the 2025 one. Yeah, that's going into borderline hate crime, because we did my man Dopey just the most. They did a lot of things dirty in this movie, let's be abundantly clear. It's bad. Yeah, I got 2 reviews out of it, but this is another one I'm glad that I watched at 1.5 speed, because it was hard to get through. Yeah, but the framing of having Dopey be non-speaking, which he canonically is, great, awesome, leave it at that. But no, we can't have that. We have him secretly being suddenly able to speak at the end of it, and then he was actually, turns out, the narrator for the entire film, and it's inspirational. Why? Where did that come from? Why did we need that? We didn't. That's the answer. Anyway, good times. Rachel Zegler is an icon, though, and that's all I have to say about that. Moving on, Dr. Odyssey. Justice for the orcas, because this show is a time. I think I'm going to put it into, we're going to put it into Unwell. I didn't think it was a hate crime, but I do think that it was the most boring choice they could have made. It was just like, it wasn't stereotypical in the sense of like, this is a harmful stereotype. It was just like, well, yeah, we've seen this exact guy in a different font 1,500 times before. Can we do something new? It's 2024 when they filmed this. It was either 2024 or 2025. Depends on when they technically started filming. That's beside the point. Either way, they just made boring choices with this character. I didn't love it. I also was offended by how they handled sharks and whales in this particular two-parter episode, because some of it was just factually incorrect, and how dare they do such things. And as you know, I really care about sharks and whales. If you don't know that, now you do. Also, if you notice my sleeves get slightly shorter at some point in this video, it's because I'm healing a whale shark tattoo right now and it really hurts. We're doing our best over here, okay? Everything's great. Next we have The Accountant. The Accountant is not going into go now, specifically because it doesn't have a strobe warning and it seriously needs one. There's some crazy white strobing that happens throughout this movie. That being said, such a good movie, so good at handling its autism representation in a very thoughtful way. I was really impressed by it. We love a good action film. We love an autistic action character. Yeah, so good. Such a great time. After this, we have Hawk. Hawk would go into hate crime, but because of its historical importance, it's going into Unwell instead. Hawk is the very first TV representation of autism we've ever got, of canonical autism that we've ever had. It's from Hawk was like an investigative kind of like, not Law and Order style show, but like in that general genre in the 60s. In this particular episode, this non-speaking autistic girl witnesses a murder. She's the only witness to the murder, and so they have to try to get the information out of her as best they can. It started off sort of impressive for the era, and then it just like really went downhill. But that being said, it's cool that their first representation that we've ever gotten is a woman. It sure does exist. It was an interesting experience to watch. I'm glad that I saw it. I'm glad that I reviewed it. But I cannot in good conscience recommend it to anybody. Unless you're a historian and you want to learn about that stuff, you totally can. But I wouldn't say watch it for fun. Next in this category, we also have Kimmy Schmidt. The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt sure is a television show. I watched all of it when I was younger in high school. Apparently, I don't remember any of that happening, but my Netflix says I watched all of it, so clearly I did. All of the characters in the show are cartoons. That's fine. Like, I'm super down for that. The issue is that the autistic coded character was not a cartoon. He was the level of stereotype we're used to. It was just like, oh, every character is a cartoonish version of an archetype, and then he just is the good doctor. Like, that was the vibe, and I was like, we are not in a place with autism representation right now where it can be cartoonish unless you went even further than what they did. And I thought it was weird that they didn't have his vibe match the rest of the vibes. That kind of turned me off. Was not my favorite. So it's in Unwell, especially because of how recent the show was. So that's in the Unwell category. After that, we have Elio. I'm gonna put into No Notes Kids Edition. I do not believe that this is autism representation. I went to the movies to see it with a friend, and I took very little notes because there's just not a lot canonically for autism to be there. They, I believe, wanted to queer code this character and then were not allowed to. And so a lot of it is left within the narrative without actually having a payoff. And we know that the narrative tools used for queer coding and the narrative tools used for autism coding are kind of the same. This like idea of like othering and not fitting in and all this kind of stuff. But in this particular character, he doesn't actually struggle socially. He just doesn't care about social interaction because he has other priorities. And I just didn't see enough pieces of autistic traits for me to go, oh yeah, this is an autistic character. That being said, I still think that he speaks a lot to the feeling of otherness and of not fitting in and of all that kind of stuff. And I still think, like, show it to your autistic kids. They will connect to this character. So that's why I'm leaving it in here rather than just taking it off altogether like I did with Dead Boy Detectives. But I do not think that this character is autistic. Or disabled also. There's, in the trailers, in like all the stuff, he has, a patch over one eye, so I was like, oh, like maybe it's a patch for like a lazy eye that he's working on or like something like that. I thought it was gonna be really cool. It was just that he got like poked in the eye with a stick or something like that, and he just like had to wear that for a week. So that was a little bit of a disappointment also. But I really enjoyed the film otherwise. It was really lovely. It was really beautiful. My friends and I were just crying in the theater. It was a really good time. I'm so glad that I saw it. I do recommend it. Next we have Change of Habit. This one is going into buttered noodles. To be clear, it's as much of a hate crime as Hawk was, and as much of historical importance. This is the first feature film in Hollywood to include canonical autism. It also is starring Elvis Presley. It's also so deeply sexist, it's painful. All of that being said, it's a fun time. It's a good movie, with all of the caveats of it being a problem. It's a really fun movie. I really enjoyed it. It's about 3 nuns who go undercover to work for this doctor who is Elvis Presley and just sings 3 songs during the movie. Don't worry about it. The way that they handled the autism was so aggressively offensive. It was in line with some of the beliefs of the time, about how autism functioned, that are super not correct, and we know that now, so it's a really hard watch as an adult. Or like even just like, it's just a really hard watch now. But the structure of the rest of the film is really fun. So if you can just like skip past like a 5-minute chunk of the film, you'll have a good time. Next we have The Accountant 2. Unfortunately, this one is going into Unwell. It did a lot of things that the first Accountant did, but it did them in a way that felt outdated, even though it was, I don't know, I felt this entire film was not super thought through. It felt almost fanfiction-y. It was just like there was a lot going on that did not need to be going on. It was just very chaotic. And it sort of expanded upon the idea from the first film about like presuming competence. About like in the first film there's an AAC user who is like the mastermind behind a lot of things. I think it's really cool. And in the second film they expanded that to being like, all of these non-speaking autistic children are actually savants and they can do all these things. And I was like, oh, how did we get from there to there? I don't want us to be there. There are a lot of other problems with this movie. I don't think that it made a lot of sense. So unfortunately it is going into Unwell, but I will remind you again, go watch the first movie. It's incredible. The next one we have is Little Voice. I'm putting it into Butter Noodles because I would have loved this when I was a teenager, and it would have meant a lot to me when I was a teenager. I just watched it now. all of my critiques with the autism representation are my critiques of the show. It was just like a little shallow about a lot of things. It was a little surface level about a lot of things. It was a little sappy sweet, and you had to suspend your disbelief a lot about how things work, which when you're a teenager, you don't realize that you're suspending your disbelief because you don't know how things work. So like, again, I would have really loved it when I was younger, but just now it just doesn't quite work. But a lot of the music is great and is actively on my playlist. Sarah Bareilles is fantastic. I enjoy her very much. But yeah, Buttered Noodles for sure. Next we have Al Capone Does My Shirts. I'm putting this into Buttered Noodles because I cannot in good conscience recommend this to anybody. That being said, it is really historically interesting. This is a book that was really popular when I was in elementary school, and I never got around to reading it. There was an autistic side character, the sister of the protagonist. And I think it historically handles autism correctly for the 1920s, 30s, whichever one of the two that book takes place in. And so I, as a reader, can go like, oh yeah, I understand what is ableist about this and how that is historically of import, but not things that we say today. For a kid, which is the target audience of this book, they would not understand that. They would not pick that up without an outside conversation. And then the author's note at the end is just really ableist and gross, which implies to me that all of the stuff that I could say was academically interesting in the text is actually just misinformation. So that kind of defeats its own purpose. But I personally found it very interesting. I think it was historically fascinating, but I cannot in good conscience say give it to anybody, especially the target audience. I do not think that this is the kind of media that children should be consuming about autism, and there is better media for children to consume about autism than this. The next one is Always Only You. This is a romance novel. It's going into No Notes. It's such a great time. The main character is both autistic and just physically disabled, and I thought it handled it really beautifully. And there was also another character who is autistic that she interacted with, and the way that they interacted with each other was really cool. And there were just some really important conversations about autism happening in this book that I've never seen in media anywhere else, which I thought was really cool and I really liked. So that's going all the way up there. Loud music is playing outside of my apartment, and this is impeding my ability to think. We're doing great. We're almost done. So yes, Flying Lessons. This is a movie that I saw at a film festival. I helped to moderate a panel about at a film festival and meet the director, and it was a really cool experience. And it's finally available for y'all to watch, so you should go watch it. It's about like grief and autism, and specifically high support needs autism, and it doesn't like sugarcoat anything, which I just really enjoyed. Really good film. So it is going into Go Now because I want everybody to go watch it. Next we have Etoile. Etoile is going into No Notes. I love this show. Does it have flaws? Yes. Are they not getting a season 2 and I'm a little bummed about it? Absolutely. I felt like the way that they handled the autistic coded character, who was more than coded. It was like, oh yeah, he would be diagnosed if we chose to diagnose him, but he lives in a world and exists in a world where that wouldn't actually make sense for the character, so I was super down for that. I felt like it was handled really accurately and really well, and in a very relatable manner. I love Gideon Glick. He's fantastic. So that Tobias's character was really, really well handled. It's a really fun show. A lot of it is in French, but there's subtitles. It's just you have to pay attention because you have to read them because all of it goes really quickly. But it was really fun to get to see what the other buildings in Lincoln Center look like, because those are not the ones that I go into. Next we have Patient. This is a BBC Sherlock style show. It is going into borderline hate crime, and I'm doing that not because it's the worst representation I've ever seen, but because it was marketed and I was told about it like, this is a big deal. We are casting an autistic person in this show. It's gonna be so revolutionary and so great. And then I went to watch it and it was literally just them repeating stereotypes that we've already seen a million times over and just saying, oh, it's okay now because an actually autistic person is in the role. And that's not how that works. So I'm like frustrated with the framing of it, and that's what's making it go that low. Because what are we, like, you can't just put an autistic person in a role and say, you know, we've fixed all the representation problems. You also need to change the narrative and be conscious of what you're doing with the character and with the world building, which they weren't here, and that was really frustrating. Next we have Friendship. This one is also frustrating, also going into borderline hate crime. This was autistic coded, or some other kind of neurodivergence coded that impacts human relationships to some extent, like some communication style disability. yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this movie other than it was a really painful watch. I watched this in 1.5 speed, and at some point I switched to 2x speed, and I still struggled to get through it. Not my kind of comedy, so I already knew that it wasn't going to be my thing going in. That's fine. But I felt like it was kind of using mental disability as a thing that is funny. And I didn't like that. Not a fan of when that happens. Mental disability, to be clear, can be funny. But the way that they handled it to be funny, I did not enjoy, was not a fan of. But luckily, the next one is going in to go now, which is Dinosaur. This I saw on a whim because somebody texted me and said, you gotta watch this right now. And I said, heard, I'm there. And I watched it right then, and it was fantastic. It is, the fact that we have an autistic person with a job. She's a paleontologist. She's actually an autistic adult. We don't get those in media very often. And it was just really well handled. The whole family dynamic was really handled, and the show itself was really fun. It was really funny. So it's on Hulu. Please go watch it. It's so good. Highly recommend. Also, each episode's like 25 minutes long. Like, it's a short, there's only 6 episodes. It's a short experience. You can get through it really, really quickly. I watched the whole thing in like an afternoon. Okay, next we have Superman, the one that just came out. I'm so bummed I did not get to see this in theaters, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I saw it just in general. It's going into no notes. I didn't think that the character himself felt like over the top levels of autism. Like, if I watched it without the context of Superman being like almost canonically autistic based on like how the community views him, I probably wouldn't have picked up on it. But that being said, looking at it with that context, because I had that context, I thought it was handled really well. And it's really with Superman, and I'll mention this because we're about to talk about another Superman as well. These stories tend to do a really fantastic job of integrating it into the narrative and integrating it into the character. Rather than just being like, autism and this thing. It just felt like it folds in. And I really like when that happens. It's very rare that that happens. This is a really great example of that taking place. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but very rare. Really enjoyed. 10 out of 10. To some extent, every superhero movie at this point in my brain is the same movie because they all follow such a strict formula that it's kind of boring to me at this point. Maybe that's just me. I think it'd be different if it was like stage combat. Like, it's the fact that it's mostly like zooming through air, explosions. I know that that's all like computer generated, and a lot of it isn't practical effects and like actual like let's learn how to punch each other. I think that's more fun. I think I would like superhero stuff better if it was that kind of fighty, but I digress. I still really enjoyed it. It was still a good time. Next we have The Buccaneers. I'm going to put it into no notes, even though this is gonna make my category look bad. It's fine. I'm gonna get over it. What if I move Superman into Kids Edition? Ooh, I can move the Grinch into Kids Edition. The Grinch is for children. That's what we're doing. We're moving that over so that it looks better. Great. Good talk. Okay, so, what did I just move? The Buccaneers. The Buccaneers. I watched this. It's on Apple TV. I watched the whole thing. I don't know why I got really hooked on it, and I watched the entire show. Both seasons. Season 2 kind of goes off the rails, so just ending it at season 1 is perfectly fine. I forgot to mention in my review that The Buccaneers has the best written example of the way manipulative relationships work that I've ever seen in media. It was kind of incredible and also very unsettling to watch. So highly recommend it for that specific thing. But also like centers girlhood, and they use autistic coding as a way to queer code a character. And I've already talked about it in this video specifically about how queer coding and autistic coding use a lot of the same tools. But it's not very often that I see it like explicitly trying to acknowledge both, and I felt like this show was trying to acknowledge both of those things, which is really cool. Really great example of that. Yeah, it was just a fun show. It was such a good time. We love girlhood and supporting each other and all that kind of stuff. It was a fun time. To some extent, do have to remind yourself that canonically they're all teenagers, because some of their choices you're like, what are you doing? But they're children, so it happens. Okay, next we have Snowcake. Snowcake is going to go into Snowcake is going to go into buttered noodles. There was a lot about this movie that I had quandaries about, but I didn't hate it, and I thought the representation was like fine. It was based on a specific actual person, so I think that already helps it. I think some of the narrative choices were really strong and some of them were less strong, but also for the time that it came out, I think it was really great. And it made some, again, interesting choices. So I was into it. I won't say it's the best thing I've ever seen, so again, I'm not going to recommend it, but it does exist. I did watch it. Again, it was like supposed to be heartfelt, and for some reason, it sort of got me at the end there, but I don't quite understand what like the narrative message of it was. I don't know, it was also one of those movies that's like strange and like like indie movie style, and that's also just not like my genre of film, so that might be part of my critique for it. But yeah, and then the final one that we have is the other Superman. It is Man of Steel. We're gonna move A Christmas Story also into kids again so that my list looks prettier. Don't worry about it. Man of Steel is the other Superman. It's going into no notes. I didn't like this movie as much, to be clear. I like the newer one better. I like how it handles everything better. It's more fun. And Man of Steel is also just entirely too long. But that being said, the way that it handled the using his superpowers, they framed it like autism in the beginning in a way that I thought was really cool and really well done. And a lot of people definitely really resonate with, and that's super important. So it's going to no notes for that reason. I do not like the film as much. I think the more recent Superman is far superior. But anyway, that is the last 50 things that I have reviewed. This video probably was longer than I intended it to be. This always happens. I'm a yapper. But this is what my final list looks like. Let me know if you agree with it, if you disagree with it, if there's anything you think differently about this, or anything that I like don't. You know, some of these shows I only watch like 2 episodes of. I don't know the entire context of it. So if there's something that I've like missed in my opinion, let me know. Again, if you want recommendations by category, I have that. I will link it below for you. I will also link the request forms if you want to request more things for me to review. Those all exist. I also have more long form analyses of disability representation, specifically mostly in theater, because that is my actual day job. So I have that also in a playlist that I will link below for you as well. Also, you're welcome to like, comment, subscribe, all those lovely things if you want. I also have a Patreon that's linked below if you want to join that, but absolutely no pressure. I know that money is tight for everybody right now. And yeah, I think that's all that I have for today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being. I really appreciate having you around. It's always fun to do a little unscripted fun time. It does mean that this is going to be absolute hell to edit, as these videos always are, but that's okay, because it was fun and I had a fun time. I hope you had a fun time. What else do I say at the end of videos? Oh, remember that critical thinking is really sexy, and I look forward to seeing you, my dear, in the next one.